They called it the Vigilance Frontier, a swath of space bridging humanity's outer colonies and the uncharted depths of the cosmos. At first, we believed these new worlds would offer us room to expand without threat, a chance to build fresh communities beyond Earth's overburdened cradle. We had our fair share of hardships, terraforming fiascos, supply shortages, disputes among colonists. But never did we anticipate an invasion from species so advanced they seemed to mock our entire concept of warfare. When a Union Council announced that unidentified vessels were appearing on the edges of our long-range scans, most people assumed they were simple exploration ships or traders from distant star systems. We had no reason, then, to fear the Lianthe Zarkin, an empire that had silently dominated hundreds of planetary systems. Rumors told of their vast armies, their twisted genius for biological engineering, and their penchant for erasing native populations deemed unfit for assimilation. But rumors, in those early days, seldom inspired action. We humans are too often guilty of assuming we stand at the center of the universe, and that attitude nearly doomed us. At Tarsus Station, a remote outpost orbiting the gas giant Helion, the first signs of trouble appeared as distorted comm signals. Freighters coming from the nearby trade corridor reported seeing strange lights in the distance, silhouettes of colossal ships drifting in the cosmic darkness. Operators at Tarsus brushed off these sightings as illusions caused by solar flares or sensor malfunctions. Weeks passed, and people grew complacent. But then, transmissions from lesser-known human colonies began to go silent, small beep indicators winking out on mission boards. One by one, entire settlements vanished from the comm network, as though swallowed by an invisible maw. Panic spread among frontier explorers and freighter captains. In hushed gatherings, they whispered that an unstoppable force was moving among the outer worlds. It was only when a civilian courier vessel arrived at the Terra Nova port, with hull scorched and engines on the brink of collapse, that we learned the truth. Its captain gasped stories of monstrous creatures tearing apart planetary defenses with disturbing ease, commanded by beings who wore regal armor and gazed at humankind as if we were vermin. He carried a scrambled data core salvaged from a devastated colony called Brightshore. Inside were shaky images of six-legged beasts, each the size of a small tank, rampaging through crowded streets. Their carapaces gleamed with some genetic plating, seemingly impervious to small arms fire. Even as the images flickered with static, one could see citizens running for their lives. Those war beasts hurling themselves against barricades, the unstoppable force behind them commanded by tall, scaled figures who barked guttural orders in a language no one recognized. Panic erupted. At emergency sessions of the Colonial Council, politicians clamored for immediate action. Some demanded we dispatch Earth's main battle fleet to the frontier. Others insisted we attempt diplomacy. If these Zarkin considered us inferior, perhaps we can negotiate settlement. The bickering continued until the council formed a special panel of military officers, xenobiologists, and intelligence analysts. Among them was Dr. Helen Cole, an expert in xenolinguistics and advanced genetic therapy, who had devoted her life to studying the ways humans interacted with Earth's own ecosystems. She was best known for spearheading Project Amphion, an experimental approach to bridging communications between humans and terrestrial animals through subtle brainwave devices. When rumors of unstoppable alien war beasts surfaced, the council summoned her abruptly, unsure if her research might hold an unexpected key. Dr. Cole arrived on Terra Nova, a strong-willed woman in her late 40s, hair streaked with silver and a calm determination in her voice. Almost no one believed at first that her knowledge of Earth's centuries-old tradition of domestication would matter, but Cole insisted that living weapons could be countered by living allies. While the Terra Nova Defense Force scrambled to gather official resources, starships, pulse cannons, drone swarms, Cole spent her initial days quietly investigating the data from the Brightshore attack. She studied freeze frames of those massive war beasts, noticing the distinctive ridges along their spines, the consistent set of bony plates at their joints. She recognized signs of forced evolution. "They've definitely been engineered," she told a circle of skeptical officers. Perhaps the Zarkin Empire shaped these creatures for generations. The question is, do they fight from loyalty or from fear? No one had an answer. Every time the war beasts appeared on data logs, they showed no hesitation in charging artillery lines or rending barricades with spined limbs. Some intelligence specialists suggested that the creatures had some form of neural chip or chemical conditioning, ensuring obedience at the cost of any free will. The next assault fell upon a previously untouched colony called High Point. Perched on the cliffs of a mountainous world with minimal atmosphere, High Point had a small population mostly devoted to mineral extraction. The populace had only a few dozen security drones and small arms to defend themselves. Word reached Terra Nova that an alien dreadnought had appeared in High Point's orbit, unleashing dropships carrying war beasts. The earliest images that arrived showed monstrous silhouettes prowling across the planet's craggy surface. Then came the frantic pleas for help. Then came the silence. For 3 days, the High Point colony did not respond to calls. The official presumption was total annihilation. The Lianthe Zarkin had made their intentions clear. They classified humanity as a Category 3 civilization, unfit for integration, suitable only for resource extraction. They intended to exterminate the population and reshape Earth's colonies to their own liking. Government propaganda tried to rally civilians, praising human resilience and resolve, but the reality on the ground felt grim. The war beasts were unstoppable in direct confrontation. Neither standard ballistic firearms nor basic plasma rifles had enough penetration to inflict serious harm. The few times we deployed heavier artillery, the war beasts' cunning overcame us. They divided into smaller packs, encircling our defensive lines, exploiting terrain for cover, and launching night raids. Their cruelty matched their efficiency. As Terra Nova braced for the next invasion wave, Dr. Cole worked day and night at a lab in Arcadia City, the largest settlement. Arcadia City's wide boulevards and shimmering biodomes gave it an air of progress. Yet deep in the sublevels, soldiers and scientists raced to find any advantage. With them were hundreds of dogs, German shepherds, Malinois, retrievers, originally shipped to the colony as companions or security animals. Dr. Cole had a hunch. If the war beasts represented artificially shaped predators, perhaps these dogs, shaped by millennia of partnership with humanity, might hold certain advantages. She tested new neural interface prototypes, not to control the canines, but to amplify communication. Her entire approach hinged on respect and mutual consent. The dogs took to it readily, some showing heightened focus in training exercises, able to coordinate with each other and with their human handlers far beyond normal capabilities. Most of the brass saw these experiments as a novelty, too little to matter in a cosmic war. They wanted advanced armaments, not canine squads. But Dr. Cole persisted. The results, at least in the lab, were startling. The next few weeks felt like the calm before a cosmic storm. The Zarkin dreadnought that took High Point vanished again, presumably moving to another unsuspecting colony. Rumors drifted in of a settlement named Eldoria that survived a war beast incursion. Eyewitness accounts describe bizarre scenes of colonists standing their ground alongside large guard dogs, some using simple gestures to direct these animals in flanking maneuvers. Word spread that Eldoria was a test site for something called the Interspecies Defense Initiative. By the time official intelligence reached Terra Nova, it confirmed that the war beast had sustained heavy losses at Eldoria, that the Zarkin's unstoppable tide had, for the first time, been turned back. This success stunned both humans and the Zarkin leadership. The war beasts, which had easily shattered countless worlds, were being stymied. Some of the highest-ranking Zarkin officers decided enough was enough. They planned a comprehensive invasion of Terra Nova itself, a demonstration that would leave no doubt about humanity's vulnerability. That would be the moment humanity's illusions of safety would be destroyed forever, or so the Empire believed. In a sealed war room beneath the Arcadia City Defense Headquarters, Dr. Cole briefed a group of top officials, Colonel Alexander Reyes, Admiral Stokes, and a smattering of others. There, she unveiled more than just dogs. She had a chamber full of cats, some of them ordinary house cats, others larger, near-feral rescues brought from Earth's wildlife sanctuaries. Mankind domesticated these felines millennia ago, Cole explained, and even though cats never fully submitted to human the way dogs do, they're exceptional predators. Their stealth, agility, and night vision could be critical in infiltration or sabotage missions. Combined with a refined neural interface, we might coordinate them with minimal verbal commands. The officers were cautious. One even joked that deploying cats in a space war sounded desperate. Still, the data from Aldoria could not be disputed. Amid the swirling currents of speculation, Terra Nova's official scanners detected the approach of multiple unidentified vessels decelerating out of FTL. The moment had come. Alarm klaxons roared, echoing through Arcadia City. No one needed the broadcast announcement to understand what this meant. The Zarkin had arrived. A cluster of enormous starships, broader than any human dreadnought, assumed orbit, methodically deploying smaller craft to the planet's surface. Within hours, the war beasts marched on Terra Nova's outer settlements. Communication lines lit up with frantic pleas for help. Colonel Reyes swiftly organized the Terra Nova Planetary Guard to erect defensive lines around the capital. Dr. Cole requested reinforcements for her specialized interspecies tactical teams, but the generals still prioritized conventional troops and automated turrets. They wanted to keep Cole's initiative as a secondary measure, doubting it could succeed in large-scale warfare. Out in the colony farmland that ringed Arcadia's outskirts, squads of Terra Nova militia braced for an onslaught. They had quickly fortified barns, repurposed irrigation trenches as makeshift moats, and placed sensor beacons along perimeter fences. The war beasts, traveling in packs of 4 or 5, began testing these defenses. Up close, they were terrifying. Each creature stood nearly 2 meters high at the shoulder, its 6 limbs covered in layered chitinous plating. They bore elongated snouts, full of serrated teeth that dripped an acidic residue. Terra Nova's volunteer forces had never seen anything like them. Despite the terror, farmers and colonists held their ground, relying on shotguns, rifles, and improvised explosive devices. The war beasts, cunning as ever, launched coordinated feints, drawing defenders out of position before circling behind them. Fearing a repeat of High Point's fate, the Terra Nova High Command began to realize that standard tactics weren't enough. Dozens of soldiers died, holding the line for just a handful of kills. One war beast could decimate an entire squad if it broke through to melee range. In the midst of this carnage, however, something extraordinary happened in the farmland skirmishes. Militia families released their dogs to aid in the fight. Dobermans, shepherds, and even smaller breeds took to the field, weaving between cover, distracting the war beasts. The Zarkin's monstrous creations, built to incite panic in a typical foe, seemed momentarily confused by the dogs' fearless engagement. In some cases, the dogs managed to nip at vulnerable joints or even leap onto the war beasts' backs, giving farmers precious seconds to aim a lethal shot. Local rumor had it that the war beasts looked almost perplexed that these primitive mammals refused to scatter and run. Such small victories spread hope and fed the urgency in Dr. Cole's lab. She and her team pushed forward, linking more dogs to the neural interface harness. They tested new cat infiltration squads. They also prepared special units with horses, huge, powerful animals once used on Earth for cavalry charges. Since Terra Nova was a world with broad, grassy plains near the capital, horse riders could maneuver more quickly across the open fields than standard infantry. The concept seemed archaic, but when an observer watched these horse-mounted troopers practice short assault runs and rapid retreats, the potential was undeniable. The war beasts, reliant on intimidation and direct force, might be taken by surprise. The Zarkin, for their part, began to realize that humanity was far from the cringing Category 3 species they had labeled us. In their orbiting flagship, Supreme Commander Saraxa Zelen seethed at the reports of war beast casualties, demanding an explanation from her subordinates. Some insisted on deploying even more refined bioweapons, potentially devastating entire ecosystems. Others recommended capturing a few humans to study how these creatures overcame the war beasts. But the fleeting glimpses from battlefield recordings revealed a mind-boggling synergy. Humans on horseback, humans directing packs of dogs that showed advanced coordination, humans carrying small predatory animals perched on their shoulders. At times, these small animals, were they called cats, vanished into the fray, only to reappear inside Zarkan encampments, severing power cables, disabling generator couplings. The accounts sounded too absurd to be real, but the footage did not lie. Arcadia City soon became the final stronghold, with the farmland around it a vast battleground stretching for kilometers. Observers spotted large clusters of war beasts converging like a living tsunami. Colonel Reyes orchestrated a layered defense. Heavy artillery at the outer ridges, small squads of mechanized soldiers further in, and the newly formed interspecies tactical teams in a flexible reserve position. Dr. Cole stood on a makeshift command platform, wearing a reconfigured neural interface set. Her hair whipped by the wind, she watched the ominous horizon, knowing that soon the war beasts would strike in. Unison. Earth animals were no miracle solution. They could bleed and die just like any soldier. A quiet tension gripped her, fear that she might be sending innocent creatures to their doom. Yet, the dogs lined up obediently next to their handlers, tails wagging in eager determination. Horses snorted and pawed the ground. Sleek cats prowled across crates, ready to slip into the chaos. Cole whispered a silent promise. If there were any other way, she would choose it. But at that moment, the entire human race seemed to teeter on the brink of oblivion. At dusk, the Zarkan war beasts arrived. Thousands of them, howling and thundering across the plains. The noise was a maddening cacophony, a war cry that shook the earth. Defenders fired flares into the sky to mark the enemy's approach. A wave of terror rippled through some of the younger militia. Automated turrets began their staccato barrage, shells arcing overhead. But the war beasts pressed on, unstoppable, as if driven by a single ruthless mind. Cole gave the signal. In precise formations, dogs sprinted alongside squads of infantry, each animal's harness equipped with motion-synchronized cameras feeding data back to the neural net. Cat teams spread out behind lines, ready to slip into any breach. The cavalry unit, nearly 100 strong, formed a wedge formation at the western edge, waiting for the perfect moment to charge. Amid the chaotic flashes of gunfire, shrieks, and smoke, the interspecies teams showed their worth. War beasts that cornered a human squad found themselves ambushed by a half-dozen trained dogs attacking from all angles. Some dogs tackled the monstrous limbs, others went for the vulnerable underbelly. When war beasts turned to swat them, a wave of rifle shots from the flanks targeted the exposed armor joints. For the first time in many battles, the war beasts faltered, their momentum broken by synergy they had never encountered. Meanwhile, cavalry lancers charged across the field, steel-tipped spears angled down. Horses trampled smaller war beasts, and the spears impaled several of the larger ones from an oblique angle. The war beasts, accustomed to mechanized foes, struggled to adapt to galloping hooves that circled around them. Over an intense hour of fighting, casualties mounted on both sides. Many dogs fell, some war beasts died in snarling heaps. The plains burned with flickering fires, thick with acrid smoke. Then the Zarkan revealed their next gambit. From the skies, small black pods rained down, bursting open to reveal swarms of genetically modified arthropods, flying creatures akin to giant hornets. Soldiers cried out as these stinging horrors dove at them, injecting potent paralytics. Colonel Reyes Radio Docteur. Cole, they've unleashed new bioweapons. Our standard suits can't fully protect us. Realizing the scale of the threat, Cole triggered a contingency plan. She had quietly studied the possibility of deploying Earth's own social insects if the Zarkin used airborne swarms. Now, crates along the perimeter opened, releasing hives of bees and wasps that, while smaller, were far more numerous. The Terra Nova defenders had also prepared sonic emitters to guide these insects toward the alien swarms. What followed was an eerie spectacle in the sky. Billions of tiny wings clashing, our bees and wasps targeting the larger Zarkin flyers, stinging them repeatedly. Many of the monstrous hornet things fell from the air, battered or overwhelmed by the swirling, furious cloud. Soldiers on the ground watched in stunned disbelief as nature's ancient rivalry, hive versus hive, played out in a futuristic war zone. Despite the partial success, the onslaught continued. The war beasts pressed deeper, nearing the Arcadia city walls. Alarms blared. Colonel Reyes braced for a breach. In the middle of that chaos, Dr. Cole received an encrypted message from the Terra Nova's orbiting defense station. Sensors indicated a large drop in the number of Zarkin drones patrolling the flagship. Something was happening up there. She studied the data, her mind racing. Why would the Zarkin shift so many resources away from planetary assault unless they were preparing a final solution? Perhaps a deadly weapon that could sterilize the entire ecosystem. Over the next tense minutes, reconnaissance confirmed that the Zarkin had begun massing resources for a planet-killing release of something codenamed Omega Strain, a rumored plague unstoppable by conventional means. With the war beast still raging at Arcadia's walls, Cole made the boldest decision of her life. She called upon an elite infiltration unit known as the Interspecies Commandos, men and women trained in zero-G maneuvers, accompanied by specialized animals outfitted with environment suits. Sneaking aboard the flagship might be our only hope to stop the Omega Strain. Colonel Reyes hesitated, pointing out that the ground battle was on a knife's edge. But Cole insisted, if they unleash that plague, everything we're doing on the surface becomes irrelevant. A small corvette, the Silver Dawn, launched from Terra Nova's hidden skyport with thrusters at minimal burn to evade detection. On board were 2 squads of human commandos and an assortment of unlikely partners, several large dogs, a cluster of specially adapted rats, and even a pair of dolphins in sealed tanks for infiltration of the flagship's water cooling systems. The plan was as audacious as it was desperate. They would slip into the Dreadnought's hangar bay, sabotage the plague pods, and eliminate the Zarkin's capacity for total biological warfare. While the defenders on Terra Nova battled relentlessly, the Silver Dawn managed to approach the Zarkin flagship's blind spot. Automated scanners that might have detected them were ironically being devoured by scurrying insects from a prior infiltration attempt. The infiltration squads disembarked into a quiet, dimly lit bay. Their dogs moved ahead, sniffing for Zarkin patrols. The rats, carried in small compartments, would be unleashed to gnaw through critical wiring in the security systems. The pair of dolphins, kept in a specialized transport container, would be freed later to navigate the ship's aquatic coolant channels. Dr. Cole led from the second wave, anxious but resolute, trusting that the synergy they had nurtured was stronger than any single species. They found the corridors hauntingly deserted. The Zarkin, so confident in their war beasts, had placed only minimal security on the flagship. Perhaps they believed war beasts were more than enough on the ground, and that no human infiltration would dare enter their central hub. As they advanced deeper, the infiltration squads encountered scattered pockets of alien soldiers. These were formidable foes, tall, scaled, carrying plasma weapons, but they reacted with shock when confronted by a multi-species assault. Dogs flanked them in narrow corridors. Rats popped out of vents, distracting them. The human commandos used precise shots to disable the aliens. Before alarms could fully spread, Dr. Cole's team reached the first containment bay, holding canisters labeled with alien script, presumably the Omega Strain. They attached charges, carefully set to disintegrate the plague and not release it. Then they moved on, mindful that more sections might contain additional stockpiles. Suddenly, the infiltration encountered a new war beast variant guarding the primary storage facility. This hulking monstrosity resembled a cross between a giant centipede and a scorpion, with multiple venomous tails twitching behind its segmented body. While the human commandos prepared to fire, the beast lunged, moving impossibly fast across the bulkhead walls. Sergeant Lau, the unit's second-in-command, was pinned under a spined limb, armor cracking. In a flash, a pair of Belgian Malinois dogs leapt onto the war beast's back, snapping at vital nerve clusters near the shoulders. Their training had taught them where to bite, where the chitin might be weaker. The war beast screeched and twisted, losing focus for half a second, enough time for Lau to jam a plasma knife into the creature's underside. As the war beast collapsed, thrashing in its death throes, the dogs jumped clear. Dr. Cole hurried over to find Lau battered but alive. She gave the two Malinois grateful pats, and the dogs responded with calm, professional composure. There was no triumph here, only relief and the pressing urgency to press forward. Behind them, the rats scurried along ventilation panels, chewing through wiring that regulated security turrets. Each time they shorted out a line, the turrets lost power or locked in place. Meanwhile, in the ship's labyrinth of coolant tubes, the dolphins performed what might have been the strangest infiltration in galactic history. Swimming through narrow channels, guided by subtle signals from a neural device, they disrupted critical pump machinery, forcing the Zarkin flagship to reroute power. This limited the energy available to defend the Omega Strain labs. The infiltration team reached the heart of the storage facility, bracing for another monstrous guardian. Instead, they found an entire contingent of Zarkin scientists and soldiers, hastily preparing the plague canisters for deployment. The confrontation was inevitable. Plasma bolts erupted through the air, slicing into crates and scorching metal. One of the dogs took a hit and yelped, going down. Dr. Cole's heart lurched, but she forced herself to focus. The commandos returned fire, aiming for the scientists' vital areas to prevent them from releasing the plague. In the chaos, half a dozen cats slinked in from side corridors, weaving between footfalls. They leapt onto the control consoles, batting at the alien hands, trying to punch and launch commands. One cat sank its claws into a Zarkin soldier's face, sending him reeling backward. Another cat knocked a crucial data stick off the console, effectively halting the countdown. Within minutes, the infiltration team had neutralized the threat, though the cost was high. 2 human soldiers lay wounded, a dog dead, and 1 cat limping after taking a grazing plasma bolt. Dr. Cole knelt by the wounded dog, hand trembling on its fur as it took shallow, ragged breaths. She whispered, "I'm so sorry," fully aware that these creatures had never been forced to fight for us. They did it because we asked them, and they trusted us. She stabilized the dog as best she could, tears burning her eyes. The cost of a war that had been thrust upon them by an empire's arrogance weighed heavily on her. But there was no time to mourn properly. They still had to destroy the Omega Strain. Sergeant Lau placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, urging her to complete the mission. With grim resolve, Cole rose and helped arm the final set of charges around the plague canisters, ensuring a clean incineration. As they set the charges, alarms rang across the flagship. The infiltration was discovered. Over the comm link, Colonel Reyes's voice crackled through. "Our lines are holding, but the war beasts keep coming. If you're going to stop them, do it now. We can't last much longer." Cole and her team raced back through the corridors, pushing toward the hangar. They had done what they came for. The Omega Strain was doomed. But a final confrontation awaited them at the hangar entrance. Supreme Commander Saraxa, Zeland herself, flanked by a cadre of heavily armed Zarkin soldiers. She was taller than the rest, her reptilian eyes shining with lethal intelligence. "You pathetic creatures," she hissed, voice reverberating in the chamber. "You dare interfere in the grand order of the galaxy?" She gestured for her guards to raise their weapons. The infiltration squad spread out, dogs at the front, though many were wounded or exhausted. Everyone braced for a last stand. Siraxa lifted a glowing baton that pulsed with strange energy, addressing Dr. Cole. We saw your tactics, your misguided attempts at using lesser beasts as allies. You do not understand the principle of domination. Our war beasts obey out of fear. They never falter, never betray. You cannot hope to best us. She activated some remote command, and from behind a heavy blast door lurched a final monstrous war beast, an amalgamation of horrors, spines, venom-laced jaws, and an advanced exoskeleton that looked nigh impervious to standard weapons. The infiltration squad wavered. The dog at Dr. Cole's side growled, stepping protectively in front of her. Dr. Cole spoke, voice carrying more resolve than she felt. We never force them. Our allies choose to fight for us because we share a bond. That's something you can't fabricate in a lab or beat into a creature with a whip. It's real loyalty, real trust. With that, she gave a barely perceptible signal through the neural harness. A faint beep responded. Then, from overhead vents, cats dropped on a monstrous war beast's back, clawing into the segments near its neck. Dogs dashed forward, snapping at its front limbs. The war beast roared, thrashing side to side, uncertain how to handle an assault that came from every angle at once. Siraxa scowled in disbelief, raising her baton as though to direct it further, but she found herself caught in the crossfire as the infiltration squad seized the opportunity. Plasma shots rang out. The final war beast staggered, losing the advantage. One cat found a gap between the plating, biting viciously. The monstrous creation shuddered and collapsed, its nerves overwhelmed. Shock flashed across Siraxa's features, replaced by rage. She screeched an alien curse and lunged forward, firing a pulse weapon at Dr. Cole. A dog leapt in front of the blast, taking the brunt. In that moment, Sergeant Lau and the others unleashed a flurry of return fire, striking Siraxa. She crumpled, her baton clattering to the floor. The infiltration team wasted no time. Scooping up the injured dog, they sprinted for the waiting Corvette. The starship rumbled as it launched from the hangar, escaping into open space mere seconds before the charges in the Plague's storage bays detonated. A series of fireballs rippled through the flagship's underbelly, neutralizing the Omega strain. A chain reaction threatened the entire vessel. In a matter of minutes, that once imposing dreadnought listed and vented atmosphere. Flames consumed its core. The Zarkan invasion force on the ground, cut off from orbital support, faltered. Terra Nova's defenders, battered and bloodied, seized the moment to strike back. Colonel Reyes ordered an all-out push. War beasts that had once terrified entire worlds were now cornered by combined arms. Artillery shells, well-coordinated dog squads, cavalry charges. Many war beasts turned feral, lacking proper commands, or simply retreated. Some tried to flee into the wilderness, only to be pursued by determined hunting teams. As the sun rose over Arcadia City, the echoes of battle slowly quieted. Thick columns of smoke drifted across the plains. Soldiers slumped in exhaustion, leaning on each other for support. Dogs limped back, some wagging their tails despite injuries. The cats slipped from the shadows, bright-eyed and unscathed or lightly wounded. Medical teams rushed to treat the wounded on both sides. Of the war beasts that still lived, some cowered, confused. Rumors circulated that, without the Zarkan's heavy-handed conditioning, many of these creations were essentially lost creatures, no inherent loyalty or reason to kill. The Zarkan presence on Terra Nova was all but defeated. Days later, after the dust settled, the newly formed Terra Nova Security Council convened to decide the fate of the surviving war beasts. Some argued for complete extermination, fearful that any living war beast could become a threat again. But Dr. Cole and a group of xenobiologists proposed a different approach, attempt to rehabilitate them, if possible, or at least study them in controlled sanctuaries. She pointed out that many Earth predators, once considered man-eaters, had been rehabilitated when treated with respect and expertise. A debate raged, but eventually, a cautious plan was approved to establish secure enclaves for war beast survivors, overseen by experts in xenobiology and guided by the same principles that once domesticated wolves into dogs. In the meantime, the infiltration squad that boarded the flagship was hailed as heroes, though they carried with them the losses of good people and loyal animals. News of dogs and cats fighting side by side with humans spread across the colonies, igniting a mixture of awe and introspection. The idea that we had harnessed nature's fierce loyalty, built over millennia, resonated with the entire species. Propaganda reels showed brave canines tackling monstrous aliens, cavalry troopers riding valiantly against six-limbed terrors. For once, an empire that had crushed countless worlds found itself humbled by the unlikeliest of alliances. In the following weeks, small rescue missions ventured to other colonies that had gone silent. They found a mixture of ruin and resilience. Some settlements were beyond saving, strewn with the remnants of war beast attacks. But others, like Eldoria, managed to endure by forging that same synergy with Earth's creatures. In some cases, monkeys or apes were reported to have helped humans sabotage Zarkan equipment. In others, herds of larger animals offered assistance in constructing barricades or scouting for threats. Each example only reinforced the notion that humanity's strength lay not purely in advanced weapons, but in an ancient bond with the biosphere of our home world. This approach transcended the Zarkan principle of dominating nature through genetic engineering. We found power through communion, partnership, empathy. Meanwhile, scattered Zarkan outposts still dotted the galaxy, uncertain how to handle the news of Terra Nova's triumph. The abrupt fall of their flagship's chain of command threw their entire occupation strategy into disarray. Some Zarkan forces retreated hastily, while others attempted a last stand. The tide, however, had definitively turned. Human fleets from Earth and other major colonies, now bolstered by Terra Nova's success, advanced with caution. They carried new infiltration modules and specialized compartments for the animals that had proven so invaluable. The Lianthe Zarkan realized that every stronghold they had would face potential sabotage from within. Rats chewing cables, insects infiltrating ventilation systems, dogs and cats working in tandem with commandos. It was a threat they had never conceived of, and it sowed panic among their ranks. Amid these sweeping galactic shifts, Dr. Helen Cole became something of a reluctant celebrity. Exhausted by the war's tragedies, she spent her days tending to wounded animals in a makeshift field clinic near Arcadia City's battered walls. There, a patch of green space had been turned into an impromptu animal hospital. Volunteers and veterinarians carefully removed shrapnel from limping dogs, treated infected wounds, and fitted horses with protective gear for post-battle therapy. Cats prowled the perimeter, occasionally curling up near recovering soldiers. The media clamored for interviews, eager to speak to the scientist behind the interspecies defense. She indulged a few official conferences to push for continued research funding in these methods, emphasizing that the old, destructive ways of dominating nature might yield short-term gains, but real power came from mutual trust. A reporter once asked her, "Doctor, do you think we'll see a day when all species live in harmony?" She answered softly, "I don't know if that day will come soon, but I do know we can accomplish miracles when we stand beside each other, human or animal, by choice rather than force." One evening, Colonel Reyes visited her clinic carrying a classified datapad. "We've received word that certain Zarkan officers want to negotiate a ceasefire," he said. "They've seen enough to know we're not the easy prey they assumed." He scrolled through the datapad, eyes weary. "But their supreme overlord, someone new, has taken Syrax's place, demands we prove ourselves non-threatening. They fear we'll strike back with retribution. They say they're willing to recognize our sovereignty if we return to the natural order and submit." Dr. Cole nearly laughed at the irony. "They can't comprehend that forging alliances with animals is our natural order," she replied. Reyes nodded. "Negotiations might still be decades off. In the meantime, we hold the advantage." Gradually, the outer colonies regained a sense of stability. In each liberated settlement, stories emerged of how Earth's creatures had adapted to local conditions, forging new bonds with colonists. On a desert world called Aurelia, camels and large desert dogs worked together to protect supply convoys from roving war beasts that had been stranded after the Zarkan retreat. On a watery world named Glacius, scientists discovered that local orcas, brought from Earth for an unrelated project, cooperated with humans to hunt down aquatic war beast variants. Every news story further consolidated the legend. We had domesticated worse than anything the Zarkan could engineer because we had done so not by breaking spirits, but by forming partnerships that span generations. In time, Earth's government and the Colonial Council declared a day of remembrance for the war, honoring both the human and animal lives lost. Dr. Cole stood on a podium in Arcadia City, joined by Colonel Reyes, a handful of cavalry soldiers in dress uniforms, and a row of dogs wearing medals on their collars. Rows of battered war beast plating were displayed as trophies, though many believe they should not be revered but rather serve as a warning of the lengths an empire might go to subjugate life. Citizens cheered the bravery of both humans and animals that turned the tide. In a solemn moment, a plaque was unveiled near the city gates, inscribed with names of the fallen, human and animal side by side. Even as the Zarkan influence receded, new challenges arose. The war beast survivors needed containment and possible reintegration if they were more than just mindless monsters. Some Terra Nova scientists hypothesized that the war beasts might eventually be taught less violent behaviors, perhaps even forging a relationship akin to early domestication. But that remained a project fraught with peril, as each war beast was a living testament to the brutality of forced genetic manipulation. Dr. Cole visited one of the containment enclosures, where a war beast lay behind heavy bars, sedated. Its once fearsome eyes now held a dull, haunted look. She placed a hand against the reinforced glass, remembering the dog that had died shielding her. "Is there a spark of free will in you?" she whispered. "Or do they take everything from you?" One day, with the war effectively ended and most Zarkan strongholds collapsing or surrendering, an unexpected envoy arrived at Terra Nova. A small diplomatic vessel from a Zarkan splinter faction landed under a white flag. Out stepped a slim figure in scientific garb. She introduced herself as Specialist HFY, an expert in genetic engineering who had questioned the Empire's tactics. She confessed that her people's entire worldview was built on subjugation. The idea that humans had taken predator species and forged companionship with them was nearly incomprehensible to the Zarkan. "We believed only fear keeps living weapons from turning on their masters," Araksha admitted in a halting, reptilian accent. "Yet we witnessed your dogs, your cats, your horses. They chose to fight for you. That is beyond reason. We want to learn how this is possible." Colonel Reyes and Dr. Cole led her through Arcadia City, though they kept certain areas restricted. Araksha stared in astonishment at the sight of a small boy playing fetch with a dog near a crater from the final battle. The dog wagged its tail happily, none of the subdued terror that Zarkan war beasts always displayed toward their handlers. "He isn't afraid you'll punish him?" Araksha murmured. Dr. Cole smiled kindly. "Why will we punish him? We reward him for loyalty and friendship." The concept seemed alien to Araksha. Over the coming days, she asked endless questions about Earth's history of domestication. She visited the field clinic, meeting the wounded animals. She looked both fascinated and disturbed when she saw how humans comforted them. "You have expanded your tribes to include other species," Araksha said in awe. "In Zarkan culture, we can hardly imagine viewing a lesser life form as more than a tool." That brief exchange gave Dr. Cole a faint glimmer of hope. Perhaps there was a path, albeit narrow, toward a lasting peace, founded on mutual respect rather than fear. The Zarkan culture might not change overnight, but a seed of understanding had been planted. Over the following months, Araksha and a handful of Zarkan who shared her curiosity became ambassadors for dialogue. Meanwhile, the majority of the Empire faced internal turmoil, as other factions refused to accept their humiliating defeat by a primitive species. Sporadic clashes still erupted on distant worlds, but the momentum favored the new status quo. The interspecies defense concept became enshrined in human strategy, with specialized academies cropping up to train both animals and their human partners in advanced maneuvers. Some of these academies even welcomed war refugees from Zarkan territory, aiming to show them how collaboration with nature could surpass brute force. In the years that followed, as galactic borders stabilized, stories of the Terra Nova War became legendary. Children grew up hearing how humanity turned the tide by fighting alongside dogs, cats, horses, and countless other creatures. The phrase, "we domesticated worse," evolved into a catch-all expression meaning that underestimating humans, or any species that invests in true cooperation, is a fool's errand. Dr. Cole, older and tired from too many memorials, found herself penning a final treatise on the phenomenon. She titled it, Mutual Evolution: How Humanity's Oldest Allies Became Our Greatest Strength. She wrote of the moral responsibilities we hold toward the animals that fight with us, how we must ensure their well-being and never let them become disposable weapons. She argued that the Zarkan's downfall illustrated a universal truth. Subjugation is brittle, easily cracked by a force driven by genuine loyalty. On a quiet morning, she visited the fields around Arcadia City's outskirts, no longer scorched by battle. The grass had regrown, shining green under the sun. A handful of war beast corpses had been removed, the last visible scars of that apocalyptic showdown. Horses grazed peacefully under the watchful eye of a stable master. Dogs frolicked nearby, bounding joyfully, chasing each other in circles. Dr. Cole recalled how those same creatures had once charged bravely into the jaws of alien monsters to defend the city. She felt an immense gratitude. Stooping down, she scratched behind the ears of a young German shepherd who had trotted up to greet her. He stared back with bright, confident eyes, as if to say he'd do it all again if asked. Her heart tightened at the memory of the dog who died in the infiltration. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved us all." In the distance, a transport shuttle drifted down from the sky, bringing fresh recruits to Terra Nova. Among them were new veterinarians, xenobiologists, and soldiers looking to join the next phase of the interspecies defense program. The war had revealed a path forward, an integrated approach to both living in harmony with Earth's creatures and defending our interests in a dangerous galaxy. We had proven we were not easy prey. The Zarkan had unleashed their war beasts on human colonies, certain of an easy victory. But it turned out that over tens of thousands of years, we had already formed alliances with creatures far more loyal, cunning, and fierce than the Empire could comprehend. We had made friends, not slaves, and that distinction was the difference between extinction and survival. As Dr. Cole stood there, the gentle wind stirring the fields, she reflected on how a single twist in strategy, trusting in an ancient bond, had changed the fate of an interstellar war. It was a lesson none of us would soon forget, and a legacy that would shape the future of our species. Humankind and the animals of Earth, united in purpose, prepared to face whatever threats might loom in the uncharted darkness of space.